All right. Hello, Congresswoman Ross. I'm Laura Thrower, and as always, I'm fortunate enough to be able to interview our representative. And because I have 4 sections of apgov this year, there's just, I don't know what's happening in the world, but more and more kids keep enrolling in government and politics. So
Yeah.
it's a good sign. But so I so appreciate you doing a video with us, and I can show it to all the kids. We've got some questions that I've asked for you ahead of time, and it'll be exciting. So
Well, I'm so glad to be able to do this. I'm sorry we can't do it in person because I've done it several times with you and I love being with the students. But since you have 4 classes, maybe this is fairer, because I probably could have only gone to one of them. So I'm your Congresswoman, Deborah Ross. I represent most of Wake County, south of 540. And I've represented Southeast Raleigh High School in Congress and in the State House. I served in the State House for more than 10 years and represented Southeast Raleigh High School all the time that I was in the State House. And I got involved in politics when I was about 10, because my mom was really active, trying to get women elected and active with the League of Women Voters, educating herself and other people in our community about issues that affected the community. And so I was in the 5th grade and my mom would take me to meetings. She would take me to go door to door for candidates. I love going door to door. She would put me on one side of the street and she would be on the other side of the street. Sometimes we would even raise money. We would raise money sometimes for scholarships, for college scholarships in our small community. I grew up in a small town, kind of like Garner, around 20,000 people. And so that's how I got involved, was mostly because my mom did a lot of grassroots work in our community.
we just got done with the unit doing Congress, so they're very interested in caucus, which was a new word that they love to talk about. But they want to know about the caucuses you're in now that you're in the House of Representatives, and a little bit more about committee assignments and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, the biggest caucus I'm in is the Democratic caucus. So you're in your caucus for your party. And we have caucus meetings at least once a week. And then we have kind of smaller meetings about messaging or about a particular topic or things like that. I'm also in a caucus called the New Dems, and they're very much like the values of North Carolina. The other North Carolina representatives are in there. We're pretty progressive on social issues, but we also are very forward thinking on education and economic issues and things like that. So I'm in that caucus. I'm in the Women's Caucus. I'm in the Pro-Choice Caucus. I'm in the LGBTQ Caucus. I'm in the HBCU Caucus, because we have 2 HBCUs in my district, Shaw and St. Aug's. I'm also in the Sri Lankan Caucus, because I have a lot of people from Sri Lanka in the district. I'm in the AAPI Caucus, because there's a growing Asian American and Indian and Pacific Islander population in the district. So I'm in a lot of caucuses. I'm in a caucus dedicated to clean energy, but the caucus that meets the most frequently is just the regular Democratic caucus, the Women's Caucus. The Clean Energy Caucus meets a fair amount too, but I try to be in caucuses that reflect the district, and I try to be on committees that reflect the district. So as you guys may or may not know, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney since 1990, which is a long time ago. So I'm on the Judiciary Committee, and on the Judiciary Committee, I deal with civil rights and constitutional law and courts and intellectual property. Next week, we're going to have a whole big hearing on music licenses, which you might be interested in tuning into on Wednesday at 10 o'clock. We also have had more than 12 hearings on voting rights. And I'm on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, because this is such a STEM-oriented community. And so I'm on Research and Technology, and I'm on the Energy Subcommittee. And I've sponsored a lot of legislation in both of those committees. And then I'm on the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is what it sounds like. We make the rules for how legislation can come to the House floor. And I love being on that committee because you know everything that's going to happen. And most people really don't know what they're going to do that week. But if you're on the rules committee, we have to come in early and we work a lot, but we come in and we get to hear about every single bill, every bill that has any controversy to it that's going to come to the floor. Some bills, get passed real easily. Those don't have to come to rules. But if there might be amendments or there might be debate on it or things like that, then that comes to the rules committee. And so I get to hear about everything, have an opportunity to amend it. And then I even get extra time when I might be able to debate it on the House floor. Wednesday afternoon, I'm going to get to handle the rule for what we're going to take up on the House floor.
Oh, wow. So I should tune into C-SPAN to see you.
Yes. Tune into C-SPAN on Wednesday afternoon. We're going to be talking about LGBTQ issues, and we're going to be talking about people who are forced to go to arbitration in sexual harassment and sexual assault cases.
Wow. Very cool. So somebody had asked also about becoming a new member, but it sounds like, there's a little bit of that getting on the committees and everything. I did have a couple of students want to know January 6th, when the insurrection happened, where were you? Or
I was locked in my office.
Wow.
So it was COVID. And we were voting. We were only allowed to have a certain number of people be on the House floor at any time. And my name, as you can see on the screen, starts with an R. So we went in alphabetical order. So because we weren't doing any votes when the insurrection started, they told us to stay in our offices because of COVID. And so I was there with Nate, my operations person and scheduler. We had only known each other for about 72 hours. And the insurrection started. So I wasn't on the floor because it wasn't time for me to vote. And they basically said, close your windows, lock your doors, don't come out until we tell you to. And so Nate and I were very well behaved, and we stayed safe in our office until they said we could vote again. And then I went and voted on the House floor, when we had the disputed electors. And we were there until past 2:00 in the morning before we certified everything. I was safe, though. I never was on the House floor until we were called for the votes.
Were you aware, were you watching the news or knowing what was happening in real time, or was it later?
We knew somewhat what was happening. We were getting a ton of emails and we could use our phones, but they told us not to have the TVs on and have the volume up because they were afraid that the insurrectionists were going to come through the hallways, right? And then hear that we were in our office and try to break down the door or whatever. So what we did was we tried to stay really quiet. So we were aware, but we did not have a big picture of what was going on until later.
Wow. Also on the list, a lot of student questions I had were about COVID, and they do understand federalism and all of this, but I guess really just what were your thoughts about how COVID, I guess currently is being handled by the states and the schools individually?
So I think certain states and certain schools are doing a great job dealing with COVID. In particular, the ones that follow the science and listen to our public health officials. In those situations, people are getting vaccinated, they're getting their boosters, they're wearing their masks, they're social distancing, they're washing their hands, they're getting tested, and they're keeping the virus spread, lower. But because we can't control everybody, and the Supreme Court has said only certain people, must get vaccinated, it's a very uneven situation. I would say that I know it seems chaotic in Wake County, but compared to the rest of the country, Wake County is actually doing really, really well. It is easier to get a COVID test in Wake County, a free COVID test. It is easier to get vaccines. Our local government has invested in PPE. It has invested in the schools. And so every situation that's as chaotic as COVID could be handled better. But when I see what's happening with my colleagues around the country, Wake County is doing really, really well.
So some other policy questions, a hot topic that my students can't get enough of talking about and debating, and we've done some current events on, is the Texas abortion ban, the case, the Mississippi case. I had a few questions compiled from several kids. What do you think can be done if abortion rights continue to be restricted by the Supreme Court or around the states? And then in what ways do you think this might affect your constituents specifically?
So we can pass a federal law codifying Roe versus Wade and make it so that every woman, no matter where she lives in the country, no matter how much money she makes, no matter what her religion is, no matter what her race or age is, that every woman would have the same access to reproductive freedom and the same access to abortion. The House has passed this. And so it is with the Senate right now. The problem with the Senate is getting the votes. There are two pro-choice Republican women, but there are two anti-choice Democratic men. And so the Senate has a difficult road on this, but they could pass it. It is over there. They could amend it to get more votes and then send it back to the House. So there is a vehicle for making this a federal issue. In North Carolina, I had a conversation with healthcare providers and advocates this week. Right now, abortion is legal. There are a lot of, restrictions and rules on it, but it is legal in North Carolina. We have a pro-choice governor who has vetoed any other restrictions on abortion, similar to the ones in Mississippi and Texas. So right now, it's kind of status quo. I think what will happen, though, if Roe is overturned, is in some of the states around us, they will be able to make abortion more restrictive, and those folks might end up coming to North Carolina. Yeah. Because North Carolina will be the state that's closest, that still provides these resources. And that's what's happened in Texas. People have gone to other states. So we need to, be ever vigilant. We need to remember what it was like. And, I don't remember what it was like before we had Roe, because that was almost 50 years ago. But we need to remember how bad it was for women, the illegal abortions, the health consequences of that. And we just simply cannot turn the clock back. We have to protect women's reproductive freedom.
Well, hopefully that'll happen. A kid had a question about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But kind of tell me a little bit about that. But the questions coming with all these things is how, and you mentioned the Senate, the structural issue with the filibuster and all of that. I think I saw this on a lot of topics. Kids are like, but how can you get it through the Senate? I know you're not a senator, but I know you have ideas. So.
Well, the infrastructure bill was bipartisan. Both of North Carolina's Republican senators voted for the infrastructure bill. Remember that. None of the Republican members of the House voted for it, but both of our Republican senators voted for it because it's good for North Carolina. It is good to be able to repair our bridges and roads. It is good to invest in transit. It is good to upgrade our water and sewer systems. It is good to have broadband everywhere, particularly after what we've seen with the pandemic and kids being not being able to access their classes online and businesses not being able to do business and telehealth that we have. It is good to have 21st century infrastructure just for how we go about our daily lives. And the process of building that infrastructure out is good for our economy because it creates jobs, and it creates jobs for everybody, from the PhD at NC State who figures out how to engineer a bridge to a person that just has a high school diploma and goes to work in construction. to somebody who goes to community college and learns how to be an electrician. Everybody can get a job from the infrastructure bill. And because it's over a period of time, it's not like these jobs are just created for 1 year and then they go away. So we get what we need, we create jobs, and we have investment over a period of time. It's a generational investment. It's fantastic. I think that's why so many senators agreed to vote for it. There was no problem with the filibuster. We also had several House members who voted for it, but not nearly at the margin that we did in the Senate. I have a lot of legislation that helps with climate change. One of the bills that I introduced that has been enacted into law through the infrastructure bill is about increasing the use of EV chargers for government vehicles. I also have a bill to repeal the Trump era moratorium on offshore wind. And we already have one lease for offshore wind off the Outer Banks. And there's another one being negotiated now off of Wilmington. And this would provide, obviously clean energy, but also a lot of jobs in the wind manufacturing sphere. I have a bunch of other bills too, and we're going to see even more coming through in our American Innovation and Competition Act that we're going to start taking up this week. But every single one of us can help with climate change. We can help with climate change. Easiest way is using less energy. So, small things, turning off the lights, not having the water flow, hot water flow in particular, driving less and riding your bicycle. There are very small things that we can do. And if we all do them in a collective way, we won't have to use as much energy, and that's better for the environment. Taking the bus instead of driving every single time, walking. It's good for your health as well. Those are just very small things, but you can also advocate, obviously. Please feel free to contact me. You can ross.house.gov. You can send an email. You can call my office. Telephone numbers on the website. But everybody can have an impact in some way, shape, or form. Never think that your effort is too small.
But I do want to ask, just so you can get in, what are your other policy priorities for this term and beyond? Just wide open.
So one of the other things that I've been working really hard on is I'm sure your students know about the Dreamers. So kids who were brought here with their parents and are undocumented and really would like to be able to stay in this country. They haven't known any other country. And I've been fighting for the Dreamers for decades. I fought for them when I was in the North Carolina General Assembly. Also, we have kids who are called documented Dreamers. These are kids who came here with parents who have visas. The kids have visas, but because we have such a broken immigration system and a visa backlog, they have to self-deport when they're 21 years old. So these are people who have been here legally, who, because we have not fixed our immigration system, have to go. There are about 200,000 of these kids, a lot of them in Wake County, because we have so many people who came to work in the Research Triangle or came to our universities and then brought their kids along with them. So I have bipartisan legislation to help the documented Dreamers. And I've worked with my House colleagues to pass the American Dream and Promise Act that helps the Dreamers who aren't documented, helps the Dreamers who are documented, and helps people who are here on temporary protected status, which means like they escaped a tsunami or a hurricane or something like that, and they still can't go back to their countries, but they need to be here legally. So that is a really big issue. As I said before, Medicaid expansion is one of the most important healthcare issues that we can take care of for North Carolina. There are 12 states who have not taken up the federal government's offer of 95% of healthcare costs, paying 95% of healthcare costs. And we have something in Build Back Better that would pay all of the healthcare costs of people who otherwise should have been able to sign up for Medicaid. This would affect hundreds of thousands of people in North Carolina in the middle of the pandemic. It would also help our hospitals because they would get paid and people would have health care. So that is a huge, huge priority. I've introduced 2 bills to deal with student loan debt. And both of them have to do with the fact that sometimes even people who are paying their student loan debt and can afford to do that, do it in an uneven way because they might have lost their job, or you may have a job that pays a little bit less. And one would make sure that their professional licenses could never be taken away just because they missed a student loan payment. And the other one makes sure that they get a clean credit score once they paid off their student loans, because some people might have to miss a year, but then they get back on a good payment program, but then they have a bad credit score and they can't get a car or get a house. So I've been working on those issues. I've been working on a lot of things, but those are some of the front of mind issues.
Great stuff. So last couple of questions. If you could remove one of the biggest obstacles in the way of bipartisan agreement, or that would help more bipartisan agreement, like structural, something in the Constitution, or just, I mean, it could be media, whatever.
Extreme partisan gerrymandering. So what that means is when you're always going to have partisan gerrymandering because the people in power want to keep power. But when you have super concentrated Democratic districts and super concentrated Republican districts, then the person who ends up representing those districts is the person who wins a primary. And then they never have to worry about facing all the voters and all of their constituents. And they tend to be more extreme, and there's no incentive for them to do bipartisan work. And so I've seen this extremeness really infect our politics.
Last question. If you had the power to immediately create a single law at the federal level, and we're going to assume it'll be upheld by the Supreme Court, what would it be?
Oh, I would create a law that would make sure every child in this country had their basic needs met from the minute they were born. So I'm talking about universal pre-K. I'm talking about making sure that they don't have housing insecurity or food insecurity. Because if every kid got a good start, then they could realize their full potential. And so much of what we spend money on and we worry about are problems that could have been prevented if we treated all of our people well and prepared them for a good future.
Isn't that the truth? It'll save money in the long run.
So. Right. And it'll make for a better and more productive and happier society.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for continuing to meet with me and do this. And we will, I know I'm going to be turning out to vote in November, and we've got our big voter registration drive coming up as well. So
great. Let's hope everybody who's eligible to vote in high school can get registered to vote and pay attention to who's running, do your research, and I hope to get to see you in person next year.
I do, very much. I do too. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.